The day I asked my daughter for help, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Figure it out yourself, Mom." But what she didn't know was that I had already signed the deed to my brand new house. And what I did next changed everything between us forever. Hello there, beautiful souls. My name is Martha, and I'm 71 years young. Before I share what happened to me, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or state in the comments below. I always love connecting with wonderful people from all over this beautiful country of ours. Now, what I'm about to tell you happened just 6 months ago, and it still gives me chills when I think about it. It's a story about the moment I realized that sometimes the people we love most can surprise us in the most hurtful ways. But it's also about discovering a strength I never knew I had. If you're enjoying this journey of resilience so far, would you mind showing some love and hitting that like button? It truly helps me reach other beautiful souls like you. Chapter 1: The House of Memories and Burdens. Let me paint you a picture of my life before everything changed. I'd been living in the same house for 43 years. The house where my husband, Walter, and I raised our daughter, Rebecca. After Walter passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, that house became both my sanctuary and my prison. It was a beautiful, sprawling Victorian home on a generous corner lot in a quiet Austin neighborhood. It had high ceilings that echoed with laughter, original hardwood floors that bore the scuffs and scratches of a life fully lived, and a wraparound porch that Walter had restored with his own 2 hands, board by board. I could still see him out there on summer evenings, shirt sticking to his back, a look of pure contentment on his face as he put the final coat of sealant on the wood. That porch was his love letter to our home. But it was also 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms for one person. It was heating bills in the winter that made my fixed income stretch thinner than tissue paper, and air conditioning bills in the brutal Texas summer that felt like a financial heart attack. It was maintenance issues that seemed to multiply in the dark, like gremlins. The roof, which Walter had sworn would last another 20 years, had developed a persistent leak over the master bedroom during heavy rains. I had a collection of pots and pans strategically placed on the floor, and the rhythmic plink, plink, plink became the soundtrack to many a stormy night. The old furnace, a beast from the 1980s, coughed and wheezed its way through every winter, and I lived in constant fear that one particularly cold night would be its last. The front steps, once so solid, had started to sag ominously on one side, and the paint on the north-facing wall was peeling and blistering, victim to the relentless sun and wind. At my age, climbing a ladder to clean the gutters wasn't just difficult, it was a daredevil act I couldn't afford to attempt. But every time I thought about leaving, I'd walk through the rooms and be ambushed by ghosts. There was the faint, tea-colored stain on the living room carpet where Rebecca, at 3, had spilled an entire pitcher of Kool-Aid. There were the pencil marks on the kitchen door frame, charting her growth from a chubby toddler to a willowy teenager. There was the wallpaper in the dining room, a pattern of faded roses that Walter and I had chosen together, bickering playfully about florals versus stripes. This house wasn't just wood and nails, it was the physical embodiment of my life, my marriage, my family. To leave felt like a betrayal of Walter, of our memories, of the very essence of who I was. Rebecca lived about 20 minutes away in a modern suburb, with her husband, David, and their 2 teenage boys, Kyle and Brandon. She had a demanding career as a marketing director for a pharmaceutical company, and David was a successful attorney. They lived in what I can only describe as a palace, a sprawling stone and stucco home with a 3-car garage, a swimming pool that sparkled like a turquoise jewel, and landscaping so pristine it looked like it was trimmed with nail scissors. From the outside, they had achieved the American dream. They had everything. But here's what I didn't fully understand until that terrible, pivotal day. Rebecca had been watching my struggles with the old house, not with concern for my well-being, but with the cool, calculating eye of an investor. You see, our neighborhood had been changing. Young professionals and families were discovering its charm, buying up the old Victorians, and pouring money into renovations. Property values were climbing like kites in a strong wind. My house, despite its creaks and groans, was sitting on a prime lot in what real estate agents were now calling a highly desirable historic district. Rebecca knew this. She knew it very, very well. For months leading up to that day, she'd been dropping hints, little comments that I, in my naivete, mistook for care. During our weekly Sunday phone calls, she'd say things like, "Mom, you know you can't stay in that big house forever. It's not practical." Or, "Have you given any more thought to your future living arrangements? There are some wonderful assisted living facilities now, you know, not like the depressing places you're thinking of." At family dinners around her impeccable granite island, she'd perform a kind of inspection. "Mom, did you notice this loose banister?" she'd say, jiggling it for emphasis. "That's a real falling hazard." Or, "Listen to that floorboard squeak. That probably means the subfloor is weakening." She'd point out the dripping bathroom faucet, the slight crack in the ceiling plaster, the way the back door didn't quite latch properly anymore. I thought she was being observant. I thought her lawyerly mind was just adept at spotting potential problems. I was actually grateful, touched that she was paying such close attention, that she cared enough to be worried about her aging mother living alone. How foolish that feels to admit now. I was weaving a narrative of a concerned daughter, completely blind to the threads of self-interest she was spinning. The turning point, the catalyst for everything, came on a chilly Thursday morning in early March. A late winter cold snap had gripped Austin, and the temperature had plummeted well below freezing for 3 nights straight. I'd been diligent about dripping the faucets, but it wasn't enough. The main water line to the house, an ancient, buried vein of iron, had finally given up the ghost and burst. I discovered the catastrophe when I went down to the basement to fetch a jar of my homemade preserves. The scene was something out of a nightmare. Water was spraying from a split in the pipe, a relentless, powerful spray that had already flooded the entire concrete floor. Icy water lapped at the legs of Walter's old workbench. Cardboard boxes, saturated and collapsing, held their ruined contents: Christmas decorations, old photo albums, Rebecca's childhood art projects. The water was already several inches deep and rising. Panic seized me. I sloshed through the freezing water to the main shut-off valve and twisted it with all my strength, my arthritic fingers screaming in protest. The spraying finally stopped, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the drip of water from the ceiling pipes. The damage was done. I had no water. None at all. No shower, no toilet, no way to wash a dish, no way to make a simple cup of coffee. I called a plumber, my voice shaking as I described the situation. His sigh was audible even over the phone. "Ma'am, with this freeze, we've got lines busting all over the city. I can't get to you until Monday morning. Earliest." Monday. That was 4 days away. I spent the first night in my own house, bundled in layers, using a bucket of snow I'd melted on the stove for basic needs. It was primitive and deeply unsettling. The silence of the house without its normal hums and gurgles was deafening. The next day, I checked into a budget motel a few miles away. It was a dismal place that smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner, but it had running water. The cost was $90 a night, a sum that felt like a direct withdrawal from my peace of mind. By the third night in that soulless motel room, surrounded by the thin, scratchy towels and the constant drone of the highway, I felt a profound sense of helplessness. The exhaustion was more than physical, it was a weariness of the soul. The burden of the house, of being alone, of facing every crisis by myself, settled on my shoulders like a lead cloak. It was in that moment of pure vulnerability that I made the fateful decision to swallow my pride and call my daughter. You know that feeling, don't you? When the world feels too heavy, and you just need to hear a friendly voice? If you've ever felt that weight, just type me in the comments below. It's so important to know we're not alone in these struggles. My hand trembled as I dialed her number. It was the middle of the workday, but this was an emergency. "Hi, Mom," she answered, her tone clipped and busy. I could hear the clicking of a keyboard in the background. "Honey," I began, my voice cracking slightly. "I hate to bother you at work, but I'm in a real bind here." I poured it all out, the burst pipe, the flooded basement, the loss of Walter's things, the dreadful motel, the feeling of being completely overwhelmed. I wasn't asking for money, I still had a little savings for the repair, though it would leave a significant dent. I wasn't even asking her to fix the pipe. I just needed my daughter. I needed to hear her say, "It's going to be okay, Mom. I'm here." I needed to feel, for just a moment, that I wasn't facing this all by myself. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. I could almost feel her impatience radiating through the phone. Then she sighed. It wasn't a sigh of sympathy. It was the exasperated sigh of someone being inconvenienced. "Mom," she said, and her voice was cold, a stark contrast to the warmth I so desperately needed. "You can't keep calling me every time something goes wrong with that money pit of a house. I have my own family to worry about, my own career, my own responsibilities. I can't be your on-call handyman or your personal problem solver. You're going to have to figure it out yourself. Figure it out yourself." Those 4 words landed not like a sentence, but like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. They were so dismissive, so final. "But, Rebecca," I stammered, trying to find my footing, "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just thought maybe. Maybe what, Mom?" she interrupted, her voice sharp. "Maybe I could drop my entire life and come rescue you? We've talked about this. That house is too much for you. It's been too much for you for years. Instead of calling me every time there's a crisis, maybe you should be using this as motivation to finally make some adult decisions about your living situation." Adult decisions. As if my 71 years of life, raising a child, building a career as a bookkeeper, nursing a dying husband, managing a household for over 4 decades, somehow didn't qualify me as an adult. The condescension was a poison dart. "I have to go," she continued, not waiting for a response. "I'm in the middle of preparing for a major presentation. Call a different hotel if you need to. Call another plumber. Call someone else. But please, stop calling me with these emergencies. I can't be responsible for every little thing that goes wrong in your life." And then, the ultimate rejection. Click. The line went dead. I sat there, in that dreary motel room with its garish floral bedspread, holding the silent phone in my hand. I stared at the screen as it went dark. And I felt something deep inside me, something fundamental, the very core of my identity as a mother, shatter into a million irreparable pieces. The tears didn't come immediately. First, there was just a vast, hollow emptiness. The person I had loved and nurtured for 38 years had just thrown me away like yesterday's newspaper. But here is what Rebecca, in her towering self-importance, sitting in her sleek corner office preparing for her major presentation, did not know. What she couldn't possibly have imagined. 3 weeks earlier, I had already done something that would have shocked her to her core, but what Rebecca didn't know as she hung up on me was that while she had been dropping her not-so-subtle hints about my situation, while she'd been eyeing my property with the avarice of a speculator, while she'd been mentally calculating the inheritance she assumed was her birthright, I had been doing some calculating of my own. You see, I may be 71, but I can read a newspaper. I can surf the internet. I'd seen the for sale signs popping up on my street like dandelions after a spring rain. I'd watched the young couples with their strollers and their dreams, and I'd seen the sold stickers go on the signs just weeks later. I'd realized that the equity Walter and I had built up in that house over 4 decades, the sweat, the mortgage payments, the love, wasn't just a future inheritance for Rebecca. It was my freedom. My freedom today. So, quietly, secretly, I had embarked on a mission. I'd contacted a lovely real estate agent named Susan, a woman about Rebecca's age but with infinitely more warmth. She came to the house, not with judgment, but with excitement. "Martha," she'd said, her eyes sparkling, "this house is a treasure. The original molding. The pocket doors. That porch. In this market, it will be snapped up in a heartbeat." She did a comparative market analysis and showed me the number. It was more money than I had ever dreamed of possessing. It was life-changing money. Then, I asked her the real question. "Susan, if I sell this house for this price, what kind of life can I buy for myself? I don't want a nursing home. I want a life." That's when she told me about Sunset Meadows. It wasn't a manor or a retirement community that sounded institutional. It was an active adult community about an hour north of Austin, nestled in the rolling hill country near a serene lake. She described maintenance-free condominiums, a community center with a pool and a state-of-the-art gym, organized social activities, a library, and even a shuttle bus that took residents to grocery stores and doctor's appointments. It sounded too good to be true. So, I asked her to take me there. The moment I drove through the gates, I felt a weight lift. The grounds were immaculate, with winding paths, mature trees, and beautifully kept gardens. The condos were not sterile boxes, they were charming, with stone accents and welcoming front porches. We toured a available 2-bedroom unit. It was on the ground floor, with a view of a small, man-made lake where ducks paddled peacefully. It had brand-new, energy-efficient appliances, central air and heating, and a spacious walk-in shower with safety bars. There were no gutters for me to clean, no roof for me to worry about, no yard to maintain. I stood in that empty, sun-drenched living room and I could breathe. For the first time in 5 years, I could imagine a future that wasn't defined by loss and burden, but by peace and possibility. There was a waiting list, but Susan, a force of nature, managed to get my name to the top. I explained my situation, the increasing maintenance, the financial strain, the loneliness. They understood. A perfect unit would be available in a month. The math was undeniable. After selling my house and buying this condo, even after capital gains taxes, I would be left with a significant financial cushion. Combined with Walter's life insurance and our retirement savings, I would not just be comfortable, I would be secure. I could travel. I could take classes. I could finally stop worrying about choosing between a new furnace and a trip to the grocery store. 3 weeks before that awful phone call from the motel, I had signed the purchase agreement for that very condo. I had put down a deposit. I had a set closing date. I had been planning a special dinner with Rebecca to tell her the news. I was going to show her the brochures, take her to see the place, and watch her face transform from worry to relief and, I hoped, pride. I wanted to prove to her that her old mom still had some moves left. But after that phone call, after hearing her cold, dismissive voice tell me to figure it out myself, I decided that Rebecca had forfeited the right to be part of my victory. If she wanted me to figure it out myself, then by God, that was exactly what I would do. My good news was no longer hers to share. The morning after the phone call, I checked out of the motel. The cheerful indifference of the front desk clerk was somehow less painful than my own daughter's targeted unkindness. I got in my car, but I didn't drive to the empty, waterless house. I drove to my friend, Beatrice's house. Beatrice was my age, a widow like me, and we had been friends since our book club days 20 years prior. She lived in a cozy, manageable bungalow. When I pulled into her driveway, she was already on the porch, a cup of coffee in her hand, a look of concern on her face. I hadn't even needed to call, a mutual friend had heard about my plumbing disaster. "Oh, Martha," she said, opening her arms without a single question. I walked into her hug and finally, the tears came. Great, heaving sobs that I had been holding in for days, for years. I didn't tell her about Rebecca's words, not yet. The shame was too fresh, the wound too deep. I just let her lead me inside, pour me coffee, and tell me that her guest room was mine for as long as I needed it. The plumber came on Monday, as promised. He was a burly, kind-faced man named Hector. As he worked on replacing the main water line, he took a look around my basement. He shook his head, not in judgment, but in genuine concern. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you've got some other issues down here that are gonna need a look-see real soon. That water heater is older than my truck, and I don't like the look of that crack in the foundation over there. I'm not trying to scare you or sell you anything, I promise. I just worry about folks living alone with these kinds of problems hanging over their heads." I thanked him for his honesty. His bill was $850. I wrote the check, the numbers a stark reminder of the financial vortex the old house represented. As I handed it to him, I felt not stinginess, but a surge of liberation. This was one of the last financial tributes this old house would demand from me. I went upstairs to the now quiet kitchen, the familiar plink, plink, plink from the leaky roof a mocking rhythm. I picked up my phone and called Susan, my real estate agent. "Susan," I said, my voice firm and clear. "How quickly can we move up the closing?" She was a miracle worker. She managed to coordinate with the buyers of my house and the sellers of my condo to move both closings up by 2 weeks. The clock was now ticking loudly, and I embraced the sound. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of secret activity. While Rebecca was blissfully unaware, I began the monumental task of dismantling my life of 43 years. I started packing, box by box, room by room. It was an archaeological dig through my own history. I found Rebecca's first pair of baby shoes. I found love letters Walter had written me when he was traveling for work. I found my old teaching credentials from before I had Rebecca. It was emotionally grueling, but with Beatrice's help, it was also cathartic. We laughed and cried together as we sorted through the artifacts of my life. I decided what would come with me to my new future: the photo albums I'd managed to salvage, Walter's favorite armchair, my good china, the quilt my mother had made. And I decided what would go: the mismatched Tupperware, the expired cans from the back of the pantry, the clothes I hadn't worn in a decade. I donated bags of clothes to a women's shelter. I sold several large pieces of furniture that wouldn't fit in the condo through a consignment shop. And then I made the decision that would have horrified Rebecca the most. I donated the entire contents of Walter's workshop, his table saw, his lathe, his meticulously organized collection of hand tools, to the local technical college. The gratitude from the instructor who picked them up was immense. "These will give our students a leg up for years to come," he said, his hand resting almost reverently on Walter's old workbench. I knew, with absolute certainty, that Walter would have loved that. His tools would build futures, not gather dust in a basement. Making those tough decisions about what to keep and what to let go of is a journey, isn't it? What's one item you could never part with? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear about your treasures. Rebecca called once during this period of frantic packing. It wasn't to apologize or to check if I'd figured out the water crisis. It was a perfunctory invitation to my grandson Kyle's baseball game that Saturday. "If you're free," she said, her tone implying that I most certainly was. I went. I put on a brave face, sat in the bleachers, cheered when Kyle got a hit, and hugged him afterward, breathing in the scent of grass and boyish sweat. I made small talk with Rebecca. She chatted about her important presentation, which had gone flawlessly, of course, about David's latest big case, about Brendan's science fair project. She never once asked about the burst pipe, the motel, the state of the house, or how I was managing. It was as if our painful phone call had never happened. Or worse, as if it was so insignificant to her that it hadn't even registered. As I watched her that afternoon, laughing with the other soccer moms, perfectly coiffed and utterly self-assured, the final piece of my delusion about our relationship crumbled to dust. The little girl who used to bring me dandelion bouquets and think they were roses, who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to tell me I knew everything, that little girl was gone. In her place was a stranger who saw me as an item on a to-do list, a problem to be outsourced. I didn't have the answers, but I had a closing date. And that was enough. Hello again, my dear friends. We're at the final part of my story, and I want to thank each and every one of you for your incredible support. Seeing your comments and knowing this story is touching lives means the world to me. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider clicking that button and joining our growing family. Your support helps bring more powerful stories like this one to light. Now, back to the moment everything became real. The closing on my house and my new condo was scheduled for the same Friday morning. The day before, the movers came. Under my and Beatrice's supervision, they efficiently loaded the carefully selected remnants of my old life into their truck. I had already arranged for them to deliver everything to my new condo the next afternoon. That Thursday evening, after the movers had left and Beatrice had gone home, I stood alone in the empty living room of the only house I'd known for most of my adult life. The setting sun streamed through the bare windows, casting long, golden shadows across the floors where the ghosts of sofas and armchairs were outlined in slightly less faded wood. The air smelled of dust and memories. I walked from room to room, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The kitchen, where I'd made thousands of meals. The dining room, where we'd hosted holiday feasts. The hallway, where I'd paced with a colicky baby Rebecca in my arms. The bedroom Walter and I had shared. I waited for the tsunami of grief to hit me. I expected to be doubled over with the pain of leaving. But it didn't come. Instead, a profound and surprising sense of peace settled over me. This house had been a wonderful home, but its work was done. It had sheltered my family, held our love, and kept us safe. Now, it was ready for a new family to fill its rooms with new laughter, new dreams. And I was ready for my new chapter. I felt excited. That night, from Beatrice's guest room, I made the call. "Hi, honey," I said when Rebecca answered. "Hi, Mom. What's up?" Her voice was distracted. I could hear the television in the background. "Well, I wanted to let you know that tomorrow morning I'm closing on the sale of the house." The silence on the other end was absolute and lengthy. It was so complete I pulled the phone away from my ear to check if we were still connected. "Mom," she finally said, her voice tight and thin. "What do you mean you're selling the house?" "I mean exactly what I said, Rebecca. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'm meeting with the buyers at the title company. The house will officially be theirs by noon." "But, you can't sell the house," she sputtered, her composure cracking. "You didn't even tell me you were thinking about selling. You can't just make a decision like that without discussing it with your family." The hypocrisy was so breathtaking it was almost funny. Where was this concern for family discussion when I was crying in a motel room? "Actually, Rebecca," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I can make any decision I want about my own property. And I have." "Where are you going to live?" The panic in her voice was now unmistakable. "Please tell me you haven't been taken in by one of those retirement community scams. They bleed you dry with monthly fees. This is the moment, isn't it? The moment the tables turn." If you're on the edge of your seat, wondering what happens when she sees the new place, please take a second to subscribe. It lets me know you want more stories with this kind of powerful, real-life lesson. Thank you. "I've purchased a lovely condominium in a senior community called Sunset Meadows," I informed her, my tone still pleasant. "It's about an hour north of here, near the lake. I'll have my own beautiful, maintenance-free home, access to a community center, and neighbors I can actually socialize with." "An hour north?" she gasped, as if I'd said I was moving to the moon. "Mom, that's too far. What if you have an emergency? What if you fall? What if you need help?" The concern, now that her financial expectations were threatened, was almost comical. "Well, Rebecca," I said, and I allowed just a hint of steel to enter my voice. "I guess I'll just have to figure it out myself." The silence this time was charged, electric with her shock and dawning understanding. "Mom," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "We need to talk about this. This is a huge decision. You can't just. I mean, what about the family history? What about all of Dad's things? His workshop?" Ah, there it was. The true source of her panic. "The memories will come with me," I said softly. "As for your father's workshop, I donated all of his tools to the Travis County Technical College. There are young people there learning skilled trades who will put them to good use. I think Walter would have loved that." "You donated Dad's tools?" she shrieked, the lawyer's wife completely vanishing, replaced by a furious air. "Mom, some of those were vintage. They were probably worth thousands of dollars. How could you not discuss this with me first? I could have helped you figure out what was valuable, what should be kept in the family." Kept in the family. The euphemism was as transparent as glass. "Rebecca," I said, and the pleasantness was gone now, replaced by the cold, hard truth. 3 weeks ago, when my water line burst and I was stranded in a motel, I called you. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for solutions. I asked for my daughter. Do you remember what you told me? Mom, that's not fair, she protested, her voice wavering. I was having an incredibly stressful day at work, and you told me to figure it out myself, I stated, cutting her off. You told me you couldn't be responsible for every little thing that went wrong in my life. You told me I needed to make adult decisions about my living situation. So, that's exactly what I did. I figured it out myself. I made an adult decision. I solved my own problems without bothering you. Isn't this what you wanted? That's not what I meant, and you know it, she cried. No, Rebecca, I don't know it. Because when your 71-year-old mother called you in distress, you couldn't offer a single word of comfort. You showed me exactly where I stood in your list of priorities. So, I learned to stop expecting a place on that list. I could hear her crying now, genuine tears of shock and regret. The mother in me ached to soothe her, but the woman I had become held firm. When do you close on the new place? She asked, her voice thick with tears. Tomorrow morning, right after the sale of this house. I'll be moving in this weekend. Can I see it? She asked, a desperate plea. Can we please talk about this more? Of course you can see it, I said. It's a lovely place. I think you'll be impressed with how well I figured things out for myself. The next morning, I wore the navy blue suit Walter had always loved. I signed the papers that transferred the deed of my old life to a bright-eyed young couple who promised to love the house as we had. I felt no sadness, only a quiet sense of completion. An hour later, at a different title company, I signed another set of papers. When the notary stamped the final page, I was the owner of a bright, beautiful condominium at Sunset Meadows. I was free. That weekend, with Beatrice and a few other dear friends, I moved in. We unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, hung pictures, and christened the new kitchen with a pot of coffee and a plate of cookies. By Sunday evening, it felt more like home than the old house had in years. Rebecca didn't call. She didn't offer to help. The silence was her protest. It was Tuesday evening when she finally appeared. I was on my small patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple over the lake, a book resting in my lap. I heard a car pull into my driveway and looked up to see Rebecca walking toward me. Her face was a complicated map of emotions, anger, grief, shame, and a dawning, reluctant respect for my new surroundings. Hi, honey, I said, marking my page and setting the book aside. This is a surprise. Would you like some iced tea? She sat down heavily in the chair opposite me, her eyes taking in the tidy patio, the tranquil lake, the well-kept community. It's nice, she admitted, sounding surprised. Thank you. I think so, too. Mom, she began, leaning forward, her voice urgent with pent-up emotion. We need to talk about what you've done. What I've done? I repeated mildly. You mean what I've done about figuring out my own problems and making adult decisions about my living situation? She flinched as if I'd struck her. I know you're angry about what I said. I'm not angry, Rebecca, I said, and I meant it. Anger implies I still have expectations that you can disappoint. I've moved beyond that. What does that mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. It means, I said, looking directly into her eyes, the eyes that were so like my own, that for the first time since your father died, I'm not lying awake at night worrying about being a burden to you. I'm not editing my life to avoid inconveniencing you. I'm not grateful for crumbs of your attention. I am, finally, free. Mom, I never said you were a burden. You didn't have to. It was in every sigh, every hint about downsizing, every time you pointed out a new thing wrong with the house. You saw me as a problem, Rebecca. Not a person. Her face crumpled, and the tears began to fall in earnest. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to ask about my day? When was the last time you sought my advice, or treated me like someone whose company you genuinely enjoyed? She had no answer. The truth sat between us, heavy and undeniable. I thought I was being practical, she whispered into her hands. I thought I was helping you face reality. No, sweetheart. You were helping me face your reality. The one where I was becoming inconvenient, and where the house you expected to inherit was becoming a liability. I wasn't thinking about the inheritance, she insisted, but the protest was weak. The house sold for $475,000, I said quietly. After paying off the mortgage and closing costs, I cleared over $400,000. Combined with your father's life insurance and our savings, I am now completely financially independent. I don't need you to manage my life anymore, Rebecca. I figured it out myself, just like you told me to. The color drained from her face. The financial truth was the final, solid brick in the wall of my independence. Mom, she sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about what I said. I was stressed, and I wasn't thinking, and you showed me who you are when you're under pressure, I finished for her. That's not a criticism, it's an observation. Your priorities became very clear. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the last of the light fade from the sky. The ducks settled in for the night on the lake. Finally, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so childlike it tugged at my heart. What happens now? She asked, her voice small. Between us? I took a deep breath. I don't know, I said honestly. I know that I'm not angry. And I don't want to punish you. But I also know I can't go back to the way things were. I won't. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be with the woman I am now. A woman who has built a good life for herself. Not with a problem you feel obligated to solve. I want to do better, she said, her voice fierce with sudden conviction. I want to be a better daughter. Then be one, I said simply. Not out of guilt. Not because you're worried about what people will think. Be a better daughter because you genuinely want a relationship with me. She nodded, sniffling. Can I visit you again? Can we try to start over? You are always welcome here, I said. But understand, this is my home. I am not a project. I am your mother. And if you want to be part of this life I'm building, the door is open. But only if you want to walk through it for the right reasons. Rebecca stayed for dinner that night. We talked. Really talked. Not about her life, her job, her kids, but about my painting class, the book I was reading, my plans to plant tomatoes in the spring. And for the first time in a very long time, I saw glimpses of my Rebecca, the curious, bright girl who used to think her mom knew everything. That was 6 months ago. The reconciliation with Rebecca is a work in progress, but it is progress. She visits every few weeks, and our conversations are more authentic. She started asking for my advice again, on work dilemmas, on parenting her headstrong teenagers, and I can see the dawning realization that her mother has a wealth of experience and wisdom she'd been ignoring. As for me, I have truly blossomed. I've made wonderful friends at Sunset Meadows. I'm in a book club, a gardening club, and I've even taken a line dancing class, something Walter would have gotten a great kick out of. Last month, I went on a weekend trip to Santa Fe with Beatrice. And next spring, I'm booking that river cruise through Europe that Walter and I always dreamed of. The best part? Every decision is mine. I am the architect of my own joy. People ask if I regret selling the family home. I don't. I miss Walter every day, but I don't miss the burden of that house. My memories are not trapped within its walls, they are woven into the fabric of who I am. And who I am is a 71-year-old woman who learned she was capable of so much more than anyone, especially herself, had ever believed. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, whether you're the parent who has been made to feel like a burden, or the child who has been too busy to truly see the whole person who raised you, I hope you take this to heart. We are all capable of incredible resilience. We are all worthy of lives filled with joy and respect, not just obligation. And it is never too late to figure it out for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that every ending is just a new beginning in disguise, if only we have the courage to turn the page. Until next time, take care of yourselves, my beautiful souls. And remember, you are stronger than you know.